the founder and chief executive of InfoEdge, Mr. Sanjeev B.
Thank you. And my apologies for not being able to be there in person. But I look forward to interacting for the next 20 or 25 minutes. So the topic for the day is India's inflection point. Now, I've been working since 1984. That's when I joined my first job. And at several points in time, we heard that this is India's inflection point. So it's a kind of a cliche, a kind of a slogan, but so is it India's inflection point, really? The truth is, I don't know. Simply because it's been said so often before. And I began working in 1984, and if I look back to what the Indian business landscape was then and what it is today, there has been a sea change. But it has not been a revolution. It has not been one inflection point. It has been more of an evolution. Although there were several landmark moments, 91 was liberalization, was a big one. I think a whole bunch of significant milestones came and went. And we have been progressing steadily, sometimes forward, sometimes backward, sometimes sideways. But overall, it has been progress. So is it an inflection point or is it a transition period? Is the question. But when I look back on since 1984, that's almost 40 years now, I think a lot of the change, the progress, the investments, a lot of it has come from businesses, industries, and models that had not existed earlier or had barely existed. So if you look at IT services, it barely existed in 1984. IT-enabled services did not exist. The internet did not exist. E-commerce did not exist. Mobile telephony did not exist. Mobile apps did not exist. Private sector landlines and telephones did not exist. I remember there used to be an 8-year waiting list to get a telephone line, a 17-year waiting list to get a Bajaj scooter, 8-year waiting list to get a gas connection. So since then, there's been a lot of change. And a lot of this change, a lot of this investment, have been driven by, new companies, new industries, new sectors. And in that sense, what will happen by 2050, I don't know. If you asked me in 84 to predict the next 40 years, I would not have predicted what is going on today. No way, I would never have imagined this. So likewise, I don't believe I can imagine correctly what the situation will be in 2050. The only thing constant and the only thing I'm confident about is that there will be plenty of change, right? And this change will be driven by talent, by human capital, by entrepreneurs and enterprise, by availability of capital, new technology, innovation, regulation, and reform. These are the 5 or 6 drivers, and those drivers have been in place for the last 30 years since liberalization in some form or the other, and they continue to be in place, and more, they are accelerating. So if you look at what's going to happen next 20, 30 years, I don't think it'll be a revolution, but it will be an evolution once again. Most revolutions are evolutions, but in hindsight, it looks like a revolution, right? But one thing is, a few things are different between now and earlier. And one of the ones that is really different is the digital public infrastructure, the digitization of India. That has sort of laid the foundation of a lot of the change we have seen in the last 5-7 years. And if India is at an inflection point today, a big contributor to that is the digital public infrastructure that has been put into place by this government and to some extent by the previous government. Whether it's Aadhaar, whether it is mobile phone penetration, whether it's data access, whether it's Jan Dhan accounts, whether it's direct benefit transfer, GST, UPI, the PAN linking with Aadhaar, the digital health tech, ONDC, these are all reforms, these are all going to be the foundation of the change that will take place rapidly in the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. And there's probably some more stuff in the pipeline which I don't know about, and something which will happen in the next few years, which will actually accelerate this change. So as India has gone digital substantially, as India continues to go more and more digital, we're going to see a lot of the change that will make the difference in the next 20 or 30 years, and hopefully will accelerate growth in India. We are already one of the fastest growing economies in the world. We'll probably stay that way in the next 20 or 30 years. But I will stop here, Varun, and I'll be very happy to take any questions, and perhaps we can dig deeper into some of the stuff. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you for coming online. I think you're amongst the few Indians who've been on both sides. One, built one of the largest, so to say, SaaS companies well ahead of time. And second, being such an early investor on the venture capital side. So being the best of both worlds. So just a few questions, a few thoughts that you could share. Uh, Investments like Zomato and Policy Bazaar were truly well ahead of time. I strongly believe it needed vision to see, fortitude to hold, and courage to capitalize. So could you share some emotions that allowed you to hold on to them so long and till they became such large?
Okay. So first of all, I don't deserve credit for the kind of credit you're giving me for what's happened in Zomato and Policy Bazaar. You know, we went in small. Uh, our first round in Zomato was 4.5 crores. Our next round was 12 crores, right? So our strategy is to go in early, to go in small, to see how things progress, and then invest more and more if the company looks like it's progressing. And therefore, at each stage, we are not taking very large risks. When we went into Zomato and Policy Bazaar, you know, if you ask me what's the vision, I would not have predicted this. I would say, listen, it's a early stage startup doing some good stuff. They seem to be good people. We we bet 4.5 crores, and hopefully we'll get some return on it. As things progressed, of course, we went in with more and more money, and then other investors came in, and the company grew larger and larger, and grew more valuable. Uh, but a lot of that is what the market did to us and for us, right? We were helped by the fact that we are not a fund, right? We were investing from our balance sheet, so we didn't have an exit time horizon. So in Zomato, we've been there since 2008. 15 years, we're still invested. 2010, 13 years, we're still invested. In Policy Bazaar, we went in 2008, right? We are still invested. Had we been a fund with an 8+2 year fund life, we would probably have begun to get nervous around 2015, 2014, and we would have been forced to exit for very suboptimal returns when the company would have gone on to become great. So I think one of the things in India in early stage investing is that you need to be very patient, and you need to be perhaps patient beyond the life of most VC funds, because India, it does take time for from inception to IPO. It does take time. It takes longer usually than the life of most funds. So to some extent, because we didn't have pressure to exit, we just waited. And we waited also because we didn't need the money for anything else. And the companies were growing. So we said, why not wait? And I remember once I was speaking to the late Mr. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, and just a couple of years ago. And, I had gone to him for advice. It was on Zoom, it was COVID time. And Zomato and Policy Bazaar had not yet gone public. So we were generally chatting on Zoom, and he said, Sanjeev, I'll tell you one thing. If you stumble upon a great company, you should hold in perpetuity and never sell. And that's what he said. That doesn't mean that's what I'll do. But I'm just saying he also extolled the virtues of being very patient in companies that are doing well. And that's why we stayed. I got, to some extent, circumstances, to some extent, good advice from very bright people, very good people.
Right. That's a mark of your humility that you're giving credit to these founders, of course. But since we are on the topic of identifying these mega trends and what is over the horizon, could you share a few industries where you see the terminal value, so to say, to decline, or which industries could come up around the corner and disrupt the incumbents? Where do you see next stage of value creation, so to say? Which industry, so to say?
So, Varun, we actually I'm not good at that. So I'm not really predicting what will do well, what will not do well. I think there are analysts who do that. They do it a lot better than me. And I only read what they write. Uh, but, the way we invest, we do it bottom up. We don't do it top down. We don't say, okay, what sector will do well, let's invest in that sector. We just look at individual companies. We meet about 1,000 startups a quarter, right, across a team of 15 people that we have. And if something looks good, bottom up, not top down, we look at it closer, we meet them, and if the founders are good, the company looks good, doing something useful, perhaps building some IP, some moat, some what we call natural traction, uh, some unsolved problem they're solving. If all those markers are there, uh, we go in. And we go in, like to go in small, and then as the company progresses, we invest more and more. And eventually, if something really works, then people say a trend hai. But we don't say it, or log bolte hain. So if in 2008, somebody had come to me and said, hey, why don't you look at insurance comparison? It will be a big sector. It did not exist. The Policy Bazaar was the first company. It created the sector, and Policy Bazaar had not yet been formed. We went in on a PowerPoint. The company was incorporated afterwards.
That's right. That's right.
We don't do industries and sectors. We do individual companies, individual entrepreneurs, bottom up, and very early. And शायद sector बन जाए, शायद sector ना बने. लेकिन अगर company grow कर रही है, we are okay.
That's right. That's right. Thank you.
But early days, and maybe it will not live up to its potential promise. But I think Chat GPT is potentially very disruptive.
Right.
And where it'll end up, I can't say yet, but it's something we're watching very closely.
Right, right. Yes, so...
let me put out if you can actually use Chat GPT to write code, right? You then reduce the number of programmers needed to write a particular piece of code. What will that do to the Indian IT services sector where, we have been prospering because the number of people we have, remains to be seen.
No, definitely it's taken away the sleep of many companies. But since we are on, in the last year was pretty difficult for the whole startup VC ecosystem. Where do you think the funding winter, so to say, is? Is there spring round the corner? Or how do you think it's going to play out the way the men and the boys are getting separated, so to say? Yeah.
So look, there are some funds, which may have gone away from this sector, right? So some of the late stage, some of the pre-IPO, some of the people whose mandate was never central to their mandate to do unlisted companies, right? But there are other funds which have got enough money. They're just being very careful and discerning. So what we are seeing is that if you are in the unfortunate position of having raised some money and then built up the wrong cost structures in the belief that, at some point that the funding will continue for the next 3 to 5 years or 10 years, and we'll figure out how to make money later, and you built in the wrong cost structures, and now you don't have enough runway and money is not available to you, you're probably in trouble. But there's enough money out there to fund companies with the right business model and the right economics. Valuation will not be where they were, so valuation will be more modest. So I would say this is rationality returning. And therefore, probably the kind of froth that was there 2 years ago may not return for maybe 7 years or 10 years. But will sensible investing continue? It is continuing. Will there be some closure, some distressed sales, some consolidation, some downsizing? Answer is yes. But will winners emerge from this? Eventually, yes. Will new winners be funded? That's going on anyway. So this is a natural sort of churn in the ecosystem when funding gets tight.
Recently, in one of the forums, you said in India, attainment of position is mistaken for achievement. I think it would be better if we understand a little more on that thought. Yeah.
No, that was in reference to young people when they grow up and what they imbibe and learn. And you're told, just clear this one entrance exam, then you'll get into this thing, then your life is made. Right? Now, so clear the IAS entrance, And then अब मैं IAS बन चुका हूँ. You know, I've arrived in life. Get into IIT, I have arrived in life. Become a CA, I've arrived in life. So the truth, what I was referring to was that look, you got to constantly work, constantly improve, and constantly move on. So merely passing an exam and getting into a small elite club, you shouldn't stop there. Should keep on working, keep on improving, keep on trying to get ahead. So I said it in that context, and now I forget which forum it was, but I said it in that context.
Right, Sanjeev ji. I think we've reached 25-minute mark. Really, really, truly honored that you joined us. Next time, we hope to see you physically.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Varun. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.